State of the Ghanaian Economy Report. Father, we ask for wisdom as we share and reflect on its findings. We pray that may the insights presented today advance the development of Ghana's policies that will lead to the well-being of its people. Father, we pray that you bless our University of Ghana, bless SGER, bless our partners and all gathered here. In Jesus' name we have prayed. Amen.
Thank you very much, Dr. Krenzel. I would like to call on Dr. Ralph Armour to give us the purpose of gathering and also to introduce our chairman. Please give him a round of applause.
The State of the Ghanaian Economy Report has served as a trusted compass for policymakers, for researchers, and also for development practitioners, providing a data-driven account of Ghana's economic performance and what it means for the well-being of Ghanaians. We're indeed grateful that all of us can join this morning to launch this year's State of the Ghanaian Economy Report, and that is the brief purpose of our gathering. To chair this morning's event, we have the honor of having Professor Samoni Adekujo, who is the Provost of the College of Education here at the University of Ghana. He's a Professor of Population Studies and a Fellow of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences. He previously served as Director of the Regional Institute for Population Studies here at the University of Ghana, and he has led and contributed to numerous international research projects. Professor Kujo is widely recognized for his scholarship and leadership in advancing population and development research in Ghana and across Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Professor Samoni Adekujo, our chairperson.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I like the way we are being very snappy because we are already a little behind schedule. So Professor Robert Dakun Osei, the Director of SGER, I acknowledge your presence. I acknowledge the presence also of the Vice Chancellor of the Methodist University, distinguished deans, directors, and heads of units here at the University of Ghana, esteemed ISA faculty, and then authors of the SGER, distinguished representatives from government, I believe some of them are here, development partners and international organizations, colleagues from academia, the private sector, civil society, and I also acknowledge the presence of our students, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure and honor to chair the launch of the 34th edition of the State of the Ghanaian Economy Report. For over 3 decades, the SGER produced annually by SGER has become very vital in Ghana's economic terrain. In an era of information overload and sometimes misinformation, this report's credibility and rigorous analysis remain invaluable. It does not merely present statistics, but as we all know, it interprets them within the broader context of our development aspirations and the lived experiences of Ghanaians. To restore macroeconomic stability, we are confronted with complex questions. So, for example, How do we balance public investment with fiscal prudence? And how do we ensure that borrowing today translates into productive capacity tomorrow? So the special chapter on debt, investment, and growth addresses these fundamental questions, real implications for every Ghanaian. And that includes the graduate who is seeking employment, the entrepreneur who is trying to access credit, and the farmer managing input costs, as well as the parent who is facing rising food prices. As a population studies scholar myself, I am particularly attuned to the intergenerational dimensions of these issues. Our youthful population presents a demographic dividend, but only if we create the jobs, giving them the skills and opportunities to harness it. So the decisions we make today about debt and investment will shape opportunities for the next generation of Ghanaians. As Provost of the College of Education, that, by the way, is hosted here at ISE, because we are always reminded that we are tenants, and we do acknowledge that we are tenants, and we are very grateful to ISE for this gesture. So, also as a close friend of this institute, I take particular pride in the leadership ISE continues to demonstrate, not only in producing this report, but also in fostering a culture of intellectual engagement that connects academia with real-world policy. And this is exactly what the University of Ghana seeks to promote. In fact, under our strategic priority area number 1, which is impactful research, university hopes to produce research that matters, evidence that informs, and dialogue that transforms. The SGER embodies all these values, providing a strong and sustained bridge between the university and society. I wish to commend the authors and the entire ISE team for their dedication and intellectual rigor in producing this important publication year after year. It is no small feat to sustain such a tradition of excellence for over 3 decades. As we celebrate this achievement, let us also reaffirm our collective commitment to ensuring that ISE continues to have the resources and institutional support needed to sustain this tradition. I call on all partners to invest in this critical research infrastructure, for the insights generated here serve not only the university, but the nation as a whole. And finally, to our partners from government, industry, development agencies, and civil society, your engagement is vital. The insights contained in this report will only make a difference if they inform real policy choices and inspire collaborative solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure to declare the launch of the State of the Ghanaian Economy Report for 2024 duly opened. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Prof. Kujo. And as Prof. Kujo said, research that matters, dialogue that transforms. So here we are going to hear about the research that matters so that we can have a dialogue that transforms. I would like to ask Professor Robert Dakwose to come and give us an overview of the report.
Thank you. So what do I have to do? I can see nice faces on the screen, but I can't see the slides. Okay. Thank you very much, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The great thing with having to not speak first is that you can always stand on existing protocol. And the protocol has been established, and so I stand on existing protocol. So, Mr. Vice Chancellor, please forgive me. Okay, so this is like my colleagues earlier said, the 34th edition of the State of the Ghanaian Economic Report from 1992 consistently. ISA annually has produced this report without fail. And it's no mean feat. And so we commend our earlier colleagues who started this and indeed have sustained the tradition. And putting this report together required that some very wonderful people dedicate themselves to doing the analysis and writing the beautiful report that you've seen for free. And so I would like to mention their names even before I present the overview. And I'm mentioning their names for a good reason. It's for the simple fact that when you see them in the room and the questions start coming, you know where to go with the microphones, okay? So this report is an 8-chapter report, and it is coordinated by the head of the economics division, Professor Ama Feni, and she was ably supported by Dr. Evans Otieku. Is Evans here? He's not here, okay, but Professor Ama is here, so if you have questions, you can direct them to Prof. Feni. The chapter 1, which provides an overview of global developments as well as developments in Ghana's rail sector, was written by Professor Augustino Fosu. Prof, thank you very much. The chapter 2 looks at fiscal policy issues, and that was written by Professor Botekson. Then the chapter 3, my predecessor, Professor Peter Korte and Dr. Afo-Mensah. Is Gloria here? I know Prof. Korte is here. So all the questions, in fact, Prof. Korte worked on 2 chapters. So we'll mention his name again. And then there is chapter 4 that deals with international trade and payments, and that was done by Professor Charles Saka and Dr. Ralph Ama, our MC General. So please let them see your hand so they can bring the microphones when the time is. Then there's chapter 5, which looks at agriculture development in Ghana, and that was written by Professor Fred Janku and Dr. Andrew A.J. Holmes. Andy, I saw Fred. Okay, good. Fred is pointing to Andrew. And then you have a chapter 6 written by Dr. Ata Nkuma and Dr. Nanama Santipoku. And then we have a chapter 7, which is on, chapter 7 is on services, written by Professor Osakoto and Dr. Kwame J. Mante. So, Isaac, Kwame is not here, so lift your hand. And I know he's here. Okay, then the chapter 8 was written by Professor Korte again with Dr. Daniel Osafo and Dr. Aisha Adam. Excellent. Thank you very much. So there were also reviewers for all the 8 chapters, many of them from our cognate department, the Department of Economics of the University of Ghana. So chapter 1, Dr. Trifo, I haven't seen him here today. Chapter 2 by Professor, did I say doctor? Professor D.K. Trifo. He's not here, so I get away with it. Chapter 2 by Professor Nketi Amponsa, who is the head of Department of Economics. Professor 3, Professor Ejepoma Jekedako. Chapter 4, Professor Seneja Bernardine. Chapter 5, Dr. Charles Yao Ochri. Chapter 6, Dr. Priscilla Chumesi Balfour. Chapter 7, Dr. Nkechi Owu, and then the chapter 8 by the former government statistician, Professor Samuel Enim. So I thought it's important for us to mention these people, so we all appreciate that the report, a lot of effort has gone into getting the final product that we will be launching. This is not to present everything in the report. It's merely to highlight some of the key elements in the report and serve as a kind of a teaser so that we all buy copies before we leave here. So like I said, there are 8 chapters, and these are essentially the chapters, and I would run through these chapters. So the chapter 1, which deals with the overview of the world economy, as well as the real sector of Ghana, how it performed, and the outlook for 2025, and what our assessment of the outlook is with respect to the plans of the government. Essentially, I think that for world growth in 2024, it had been declining from about 2023, and it is projected to continue that decline in 2025. On the other hand, so for sub-Saharan Africa, we have seen from 2023 increasing growth, be it marginally, but at least we've sustained growth. And so post-COVID recovery and has been sustained in a way. In terms of inflation, we've seen disinflation both at the world level, but also for sub-Saharan Africa. And indeed, the trends that we've observed in Ghana is no different. This is not to suggest that there has been no effort in achieving the levels of inflation that we've achieved, but it's merely to suggest that generally there is disinflationary trends that is conferred by the global economy. World commodity prices remained largely flat, but it is anticipated that there will be some slight increases in the prices of the world commodity prices, which will be engendered by demand pressures, but also the geopolitics which can affect the supply side of things from the world economy. And so, in terms of the world economy and in terms of how sub-Saharan Africa is faring with respect to the global economy, you can see, oh, these things don't point. Okay, but for sub-Saharan Africa as opposed to the world economy, you can see that from 2023, 2024, the trend seems to change, and so it's upward. Now, for the global economy, we've seen the growth coming down, but unemployment rate at the global level is also declining. We cannot say the same for sub-Saharan Africa, where there has been marginal increases in unemployment, which then raises issues about the types and sources of growth that we are experiencing in sub-Saharan Africa. So how did Ghana fare in 2024 in terms of its overall GDP? Of course, we know the headline numbers, right? We achieved a 5.7% growth in GDP, which was higher than what we had anticipated. We had projected about 4%, and we achieved 5.7. I think it was about 4.2%. And the sources of that growth in terms of the broad sectors was largely driven by industry. Okay, so agric, compared to 2023, didn't do or couldn't even match the 2023 levels. But industry, with the negative growth recorded in 2023, seemed to have recovered in 2024 significantly. So there will be some base effects which would explain that, but generally there is more to it than just a base effect. Okay, if you look at the mining and quarrying in the industrial sector, you see that that has been key in driving the growth rates. But it's not just the mining and quarrying, and I'll comment a bit on the mining and quarrying in a bit, but also construction. Now, given that 2024 was an election year, again, the fact that you see strong growth in construction is not surprising, right? You know the story about election cycles and how policy reacts in election cycles. And so for the construction, that is not too surprising. Because note that 2023, the construction subsector grew at 2.5%. So for 2024 to have jumped to 9.6 is a big jump. And again, reflects the fact that in election years, we try to do more than we typically do, particularly in terms of construction. The story, though, is about the mining and quarrying, which saw significant increases, 9.4%. Okay, so again, this raises questions about the efforts we are making in terms of the fight against illegal mining, and what the trade-offs potentially are if we have to go drastic. Okay, because this is a sector that is now really pulling the country's GDP. Compare that to cocoa. Okay, cocoa declined by 22%. 22%, in spite of the fact that in 2024, world producer prices was on the up. Again, these are some of the details will be presented later when we look at the agricultural sector. So we seem to be, there seem to have been a shift in terms of the sectors that are the growth, quote unquote, growth poles. But at what cost is the question. Okay. For the services sector is the largest sector of the Ghanaian economy now in terms of contribution to GDP. And growth in the sector has been strong. And the growth is driven from the information and communication subsectors. Again, there are very interesting questions that one could delve into in terms of what these patterns of growth mean for structural transformation generally in Ghana. Are we seeing the transformation that will result in growth in decent jobs over time? Okay. So there are important questions for structural transformation from these growth numbers. Some of these are captured, these discussions are captured in the chapter, and so the plan is not to tell you everything in the SGER. The plan is to get you to buy them. Okay. But if you look at the sector, so this is what I was referring to in terms of the sector contributions. Agriculture is just doing about a fifth of the total GDP, Services is doing over 47%. Industry has largely remained around a third. But if you take this series even back, you would find that typically in development, you expect that as countries grow, the importance of agric will begin to diminish, industry takes over, and then after a while, services take over. For us, we leapfrogged the industry industrial sector growth phase, and we seem to have jumped to the services. Again, it has huge implications for structural transformation. Okay. So the next chapter, chapter 2, looks at fiscal developments in 2024. You know that from the beginning of 2024 and based on when we launched the 2023 report, one of the key things that we highlighted was the fact that fiscals usually tend to slip in election years. When we say fiscal slip, essentially what we mean is that the targets that we set for ourselves usually are not met in an adverse way. Okay? So they become worse than what we anticipate. So we started the year and then we set ourselves a nice target of 4.2, which is consistent with what the fiscal rules are, even if we had suspended the Fiscal Responsibility Act. And of course, even the target we set in 2024 was supposed to be slightly worse than the 2023 outcomes. Okay, so 2024, we set a target saying that, oh, we know 2024 is an election year, so we are likely to not do as well from a fiscal point. Well, we went way off. For the target of 4.2 in terms of commitments, we hit an outturn of about 7.9%. So the difference, in very layman's language, the difference between our expenditures and our revenues was in the negative. We were spending more, or we spent more than we raised in revenue. And that was about 7.9% of our GDP. On a cash basis, even though we missed the target, it was much lower. Again, these things have, there's more to the story than the numbers, right? Because typically for the commitments, fiscal deficits, in terms of the commitments, what it signals is that if we have large slippages, it means that the state is borrowing from people within the country to spend. Of course, you have to look at where the sources of the slippages, and we'll look at that in a minute. But where your commitments are significantly higher than your cash basis in terms of the deficits, it means that you are doing proxy borrowing, right? So you say that, oh, I'm going to spend, so I give you a contract to do works, right? But I don't pay you now. But you have to look for money to do the works. And that's what we call the proxy borrowing. So you would have borrowed. I would have borrowed money from you without you knowing that I've borrowed money from you. And depending on the rate of inflation and the interest rates, it could have implications for private businesses. But these things are not a one-off game. And so for the private actors, they build these things into their own prices, their expectations, because they know that if they are going to get a government contract in an election year, the likelihood is that they are not going to be paid for 1 year. So they build it into their pricing. And so that all also feeds into essentially the efficiency of spending. So our physicals were worse than we actually did anticipate. Now, like I said, in layman's language, the physicals is essentially just what you raise as a country and what you spend, right? And so if you have slippages, you can look at the two arms and then interrogate where the source of the slippage is coming from. If you look at the revenue, we started the year and said we will get revenue of about 16.8% of GDP. Even that is nothing to write home about compared to the sub-Saharan Africa average. And then mid-year, we said we are feeling very confident. And so we are even going to raise the target up. So we said that we've revised that target to 17.4% of GDP. Okay, at the end of the year, we end up with an outturn that is lower than what we originally thought. Okay, so we got excited, unnecessarily excited somewhere along the line in 2024. But the bottom line is that the target was not met from the revenue side. But at least, even if you compared to the original target, which was the 16.8, it's just about 1 percentage point. Now look at your expenditures. Already your expenditures are significantly higher than your revenues. So you target 21.6% of GDP for 2024, and then you say, I'm feeling confident. So I'm going to revise the targets down. Okay, we only revised it to 21.5, but at least we are doing something, right? Okay, it turns out we could only do 23.7. So it is clear that the slippages in terms of the fiscal which occurred in 2024 was largely driven by spending, right? And a lot of that spending was from private businesses. It was crowding in or crowding out, right, resources from the private sector. If you look at the breakdown of the revenue and expenditures, and in terms of what we are projecting for 2025, so 2025, we've set ourselves very strict targets. Again, if you look at Ghana's fiscals over the years, this is not surprising. Election years, we have large slippages. Post-election years, we really tighten our belts, okay? And usually the first 2 years, post-election, we do quite well from a fiscal point. So we've set ourselves at 19.2. Remember, the last year's outcome was about over 23% of GDP. So we really mean business. And if our revenue target of 16% is met, that would mean that we have a difference of around 3%. Compared to the 7.9, that is a big, big improvement from a fiscal point. So fiscal consolidation is certainly key. Part of the challenge with respect to having your slippages being engendered from your expenditure side is that it's not always the case that we, okay, let me be careful how I put this. You know, if you are spending and you are spending a lot, you want to be sure that you are also investing for tomorrow. And it is not always the case that our large slippages have translated into investment type spending. And again, the chapter that looks at debt and GDP reflects also on this. And so your capital expenditures, which is essentially where you'll be doing a lot more of the public investments, seem to have very little, well, it's not prioritized. Let me just put it that way. Okay? Usually we think about the statutory funds as being the one that you cannot change, right? Because it's established by law. But technically, your compensation line you cannot change. And in fact, there is always pressure to increase that. Interest payment you cannot, unless you want to do a haircut. Okay? So technically, the rigidities that are inherent in your spending will mean that you have very limited fiscal space. So we then will be using the capex line as an adjustment arm. Anytime there is an adverse shock and we want to adjust, let's reduce our capital expenditures, and then we compromise future growth. Okay, so there are structural issues with respect to our fiscals, and indeed, the fiscal consolidation that we've seen certainly should be encouraged, and indeed, it should be sustained. I know that sometimes when we've asked this question about the trade-offs with spending more now against doing fiscal consolidation, but you need to get the balancing act right. Otherwise, you will tend to compromise future growth as well. So I think I've discussed most of this already in terms of the fiscal targets for 2025. But I think the key thing is that given how we have performed from the year to now, to date, I think it's fair to say that we seem to be on track in terms of meeting our fiscal targets. Okay, so fiscal consolidation is on track. Okay, so the technology is on break. Okay. So the chapter 3 then looks at the monetary and financial sector. And again, for 2024, we started the year thinking about the fact that it's an election year, and therefore, in election year, we tend to be a bit loose in terms of our fiscals, and that has implications for monetary policy as well. However, 2024 as well, we were in an IMF program. Okay, so this was expected in a way to impact on how we performed from the monetary side as well. And remember that the effects of the DDP was, indeed, it still is lingering, okay? Plus, all the tariff wars that we've seen from the geopolitical space. But there were quite positive sentiments because of the reviews that were done by the IMF for the extended credit facilities. So money supply generally was lower than it was in 2024, driven by both the net domestic assets and the net foreign assets. But in 2024, for the policy rate, at least we began to see the Bank of Ghana try and react to some of the developments in the economy by bringing the policy rate down. And so I think the second adjustment happened in September of 2024, and it brought it down to 27%. Inflation, like I said when I was discussing the global trends, we've seen disinflation happen. Okay, and of course in 2022 we saw our inflation hit 52 or thereabouts, and food inflation was close to 60%. However, I think that the decline in inflation in the last year and indeed in the last 9 months is commendable. Significant decline in inflation, so much so that even the target that was set for the year, for the end year, has been exceeded as of now, and it's expected to come further down. Largely, food inflation has been very important, and you know that the food component is an important component in the inflation basket. So it has been important in bringing inflation down. So with the trends currently, and also with the exchange appreciation, and if we can get stability, clearly there will be some pass-through of that to prices, and that we expect to positively impact on inflation. So in other words, the target that has been set, indeed the target has been exceeded, but it is anticipated that we'll hit around 8%, and I think given the trends, one will not doubt it. This is the exchange depreciation. So we have seen some reversion of the exchange rate to the 2023 levels. In fact, it's a bit lower than the levels that we saw in 2023, and these are the average exchange rates. So currently, we are doing under 11 cedis to the US dollar. The pressures in 2024 had significant implications also for our physicals, because of course you have to service your debt. Okay, but the appreciation of the exchange rate has been very positive, and I want to believe that it has also contributed to the disinflationary pressures that we've seen. Okay. So some of the key monetary and financial developments in 2025, inflation trending downwards. Okay, so in fact, like I mentioned, now we are around 9.4, which is significantly lower than the 11.8 that was targeted. BOG expects the 8%. Of course, the 8% plus or minus 2 has already been reached, but I think they anticipate that the 8% will be achieved. The exchange rates have performed quite well, and again, currently we are around 10%. The challenge, though, with the exchange rate is to have it stable. Okay, the swings tend to be quite problematic, and so the less volatile it is, the better it is for planning for businesses. I hope I've not jumped. Yeah. The MPR is currently around 25%. So remember September 2024, it was around 27%. So it's coming down. Hopefully, this is also going to translate to lower lending rates. But there is a catch, and I'll come to that in a minute. But with interest rates declining, and of course you've seen our T-bills also coming down. So for those of you who have been doing T-bills, I'm sure you get angry by the day. Okay. Generally, it's good for the economy, even if it's not good for you as individuals, but it is good for the economy. Hopefully, the lending rates will follow so that businesses can actually borrow, invest, and employ. If businesses grow and employ, then the economy grows, so that the benefits then becomes a bit more widespread. However, the interest spread remains still high, even if it has declined. So if you take your money to the bank, the interest they give you versus the interest that you will pay if you borrowed money from the bank is still quite big. And it speaks to the generally efficiency with which the economy is operating. The final point we make in respect, or made in the book in respect of the monetary and financial developments, has to do with the banking or the financial sector. One of the great things that we've seen, and maybe a very positive thing in respect, in hindsight, of some of the reforms that the Bank of Ghana did over the last, should I say, 10 or so years, right? The banks have remained very resilient in spite of all the shocks that have come in, and of course, the DDEP. So if you look at a lot of the indicators, whether it's the capital adequacy, the cost to income ratio, generally, they seem to have actually improved, which is a good thing for the country. One of the problem areas, however, has to do with the NPLs, the non-performing loans. Where the non-performing loans are high, in spite of what is happening to the monetary policy rates, it's very difficult for banks to adjust their lending rates. So if you have non-performing loans of 23%, what it essentially means is that if a bank lends 100 Ghana cedis, on average, it's not going to get back 23%, 23 cedis. Of course, banks are there not to please us. They are also supposed to be making money. And so some of you have bought shares in banks, right? So you expect banks to get profits. So for the bank to stay afloat, they should start at 23% on average in terms of lending rates. Of course, they can do profiling and tell whether Profeni can pay. So Profeni usually not like Robert. So Robert, it's difficult to track. Okay, so they can do profiling, risk profiling, and appropriately discriminate in terms of the lending rates. But on average, it's very difficult for the bank's lending rates to come significantly below your NPL. Okay. So all of us have a role to play. So when we borrow money from the bank and we are not paying, note that it will come to bite us eventually as well. Okay, so even though the debt investment and growth chapter is the last chapter in the book, because of the discussions in respect of the fiscals and then the monetary, we thought that we will show the highlights here before we proceed to some of the other chapters. So, very interesting chapter. And I think that the story of Ghana's debt is something that all of us should go back and read again. For sub-Saharan Africa, over the last 2 decades, our debt has increased. Of course, Ghana inclusive. Now, the worrying part of this is that in the 2000s, we went, screamed, danced, rolled, jumped, did all we could so we could get HIPIC. And so we got a lot of debt relief, Ghana included. Okay? But somehow, 2 decades after, we want another debt relief. Well, we sought one, we didn't get it, so we forced it on citizens, right, through the DDEP. Okay, so the issue about debt is quite something that we need to worry about also. But it has implications also and emanates from some of the things that we do in the physicals. Remember that if every year you spend more than you borrow, how do you pay for the difference? You go and borrow from somebody, somewhere, right? You spend more than you earn, right? Your revenue. You have to borrow to make up the difference. So if consistently you spend more than you actually earn, then consistently you'll be growing your debt. The issue with debt financing is that it has to be invested so that the returns, be it medium term or long term, exceeds the cost of the debt. Okay. So the increases in debt, the chapter reflects on this. But importantly, the increases in debt has not necessarily translated into increases in investments. Like I said, if you borrow the money and it's for only recurrent spending to buy plenty vehicles and ride in them, somewhere down the line, you'd have to figure out how to deal with the challenges that would have emanated from that. So there is this beautiful graph in the chapter which attempts to show the debt GDP ratio over time and, of course, your investments or capital accumulation over time. Now, the capital accumulation is the line in the middle. Don't ask me to name the color, please. And the debt accumulation is the line on top. So you realize that post 2009, 2010, it has seen very sharp growth. But the investments or capital accumulation has not followed. Okay? So, unsurprisingly, it would then not be able to translate into growth. Of course, in terms of the growth, you don't expect it to be, how do you say contemporaneous? To match the same year, right? Because if you invest, it might take some time to react in terms of the growth. So you might not see it the same year. So, of course, but even if growth was to be lagging and growing, even if it's lagging, then you would have been confident and say, okay, the debt is doing something. But the growth also, the growth line is the one, the last line, which is close to the axis. It's not changing by much. Okay? So what this graph is showing is a very powerful message. You are doing a lot of accumulation of debt. That debt is not translating into capital accumulation, and you are not seeing the results in terms of growth. And so the chapter has some recommendations, and one is essentially that sustainable debt management has to be quite an important part of our thinking, our everyday thinking. But also what you use the investments for. Remember I said CAPEX is what, about a little over 12% of our spending. That's the capital expenditures. And so, of course, if your spending efficiency is not great, that will mean that even the little you are investing in is not actually going to help you by much. So the elasticity or the responsiveness of growth to your spending will be very low. So improving the investment efficiency also does matter in the discussion on the debt or the sustainable debt management policies. Okay, so that is our chapter 8, and it's certainly worth reading. Now there is also a chapter 4, that looks at international trade and the external sector. And one of the things that this chapter shows is the fact that our balance of payments, economics, coin all these terms to confuse us, it improved. If you like, it's your payment systems. Money is flowing in and out of the country with the international world. Okay? And the current accounts typically reflect what you do with your trade. So if you are able to sell a lot more with the rest of the world than you buy from the rest of the world, then you get more dollars. Is that not so? You export more, you import less. So where the trade balance is positive, that is good for the country. And we have seen that the current account was quite important in driving this balance of payments. One of the things also that the chapter talks about has to do with the, usually when they bring you a paper like this, you are being warned that you've overstayed your welcome. So I'll be leaving you soon, don't worry. Okay. All right, so the reserves at the end of 2024 was about 4 months of import cover. The target for the beginning of the year was around, I think, 3.2 or so. So we did better than what we anticipated we will do. Okay, so let me speak on some of the interesting things I find in the chapter so that Nanama doesn't send me another paper. Now it's white. The next time it might be yellow. Okay. Okay, so like I said, the trade sector did quite well. So for that chapter, I think one of the things which also excites me, not in a good way, but it excites me because, of course, once you are an economist and you are looking at some of these things, you begin to reflect about what the options really are and what the implications also are. You see that our cocoa exports have been declining over the years. So we're saying that we did well in exports, but where was that doing well coming from? The doing well was coming from minerals. And for the minerals, over 97% of it was gold. Remember what I said about the illegal mining. So not only are you seeing that in your physicals, you're also seeing that in your balance of payments, your current accounts, that the gold is featuring very positively. Of course, you've got to think about what the implications of substituting other sectors for illegal mining is, because it's not just about how much money you get from exporting. Okay. So again, this is something that, and again, once my head of division comes to speak on the agri sector, she might touch on the issues in respect of the cocoa. But certainly, something is happening in respect of the exports of minerals vis-a-vis cocoa. Remember, I also mentioned that the world producer prices of cocoa actually increased over the year. Okay, so we haven't responded. Of course, the response will always come with a lag, but we may not have responded. And we talk about the smuggling because of the price differentials between Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. But probably this has still not translated into positive performance of the cocoa sector. Okay, non-traditional exports, we will pass that. I would quickly speak on the direction of trade, and then Nanama, I would hand over back to you. In terms of our exports, very interesting, South Africa is now our major export destination. And you know what we are sending there? Minerals. 84% of our exports to SA is in precious minerals. Of course, you ask the question, South Africa is a gold producing country. So why are we sending gold to South Africa? Okay, value addition, issues relating to value addition within the economy. From our imports, if you take out oil, for almost all the sectors, it's dominated by China and India. You take out oil, right? China and India. So China has become quite an important source. The question is, what sort of imports are we getting? But you would find, if you look through this, is it a picture or is it a graph? You would find countries like Vietnam, where we talk about vegetable products, but also rice. Okay, I think this morning City FM was doing some discussion on the rice imports. Okay, so clearly these are things which potentially we can try and then do better in terms of production and help insulate our economy, because if we become too reliant on other countries, just a few countries, for some of these things, it could have adverse implications for us. So dependence on a few primary commodity exports is definitely not good. The issue about adding value to our key exports, now gold is our key export, is something that we need to revisit. and maybe the Gold Board can take some of these issues up. But this change in the emphasis of gold for cocoa is one that we have to be very deliberate about tackling from a policy point, because it will just not happen. And of course, if we are making so much from the small-scale gold mining and we are not regulating them appropriately, then the cost is even higher than just the cost of losing your cocoa. Of course, there are other costs which are associated with health and environment. So I believe that on that note, I have duly overstayed my welcome. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Director. So before Prof. Feni takes over, I know we've had a lot to hear. I want us to, how many people exercised this morning? Aha. Most people are like me, we didn't do anything. So just for a minute, I didn't exercise, but I'll lead you in exercises. Could we just stand up and kind of lift up our hands? Just wiggle a bit, just to release some of the sitting down we've done for the past hour. Yes, just a little bit of wiggling. Some people are not wiggling. I'll call names. Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you. So, Prof. Feni will take over now.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the last part of our presentation. Because we've already touched on some of the sectorial developments, I will just give you some highlights in the chapters, and then obviously we have our chapter authors here. We will deliberate on issues in the relevant chapters as we move into our questions and answers. So for the agricultural sector, again, the sector underperformed in 2024 compared to 2023. What we have noticed and what we have analyzed has shown that, yes, we do have very elaborate policy goals, very ambitious policy targets, but we are very unable to translate this into gains. And so, yes, we see a sector that has cocoa severely underperforming, shrinking by about 22.4%. But there are other crops and other subsectors that we also need to look at. Okay. All right. I hear there's a technique to this. All right, so when we look at the other subsectors, we recognize that even for crops, livestock, and even fisheries, the growth has been very modest. And for forestry and logging, we are actually seeing a contraction. So again, Professor must have alluded to this. You see the cocoa prices very high up, but then production very low. And we are looking at the adverse effects of not just smuggling, but also climate change and some issues around aging cocoa trees. The policies have been very extensive. I'm just pointing a few out that have been highlighted in the chapter. You have Planting for Food and Jobs, Phase 2. You have the Developed Economic Enclave Project. You have projects in fisheries and aquaculture. And a lot of these projects, again, have not been fully funded, and so we are still not seeing the kind of growth that we expect from these projects. When we go to the crop subsector, again, we're seeing variations across the different crops. One of the the commodities that is showing some positive outlook is rice. So if you look on this graph, you're seeing that rice yield per cultivated area outperformed all the other crops. And the question is, if we are producing so much rice, why are we importing so much of it? So we really need to look at what we are doing with our investments in this particular crop. Now we move to the non-traditional agricultural exports. And again, there's a very good indication here. So we see the non-traditional exports contribution increasing by about 13.5%, which is a good thing. And is driven by increase, almost double increase from shea nuts exports, largely driven by demand from the cosmetic industry, and also pineapple and mango doubling. So we see some positive outlook in this regard. So our outlook for 2025, we are again back to so many programs. We have a new one, Feed Ghana program, driven by the fact that we want to see productivity increase, we want to see import substitution, and we also want to see food security. But we have lessons from 2024 to learn from. We have invested into so many policies, so many policy initiatives, but the question is how many of these initiatives is really translating into positive gains? We need to look at these targets again. The authors suggest that maybe the targets for these initiatives are too ambitious, too high, and really not achievable in the given period that we have. So the question is, by 2028, are we going to achieve the key targets of the Feed Ghana program? Okay. Now let's move to the industrial sector. Again, I'm just going to highlight key areas that our authors point out. A lot of these have already been talked about, so I'll just briefly touch on them. Gold mining and construction drove industrial growth in 2024. We've already been told. Again, we need to worry about whether the 2024 recovery plan can be sustained on the back of gold. How sustainable is this? Because we also see that gold, the output is stabilizing over time. So how sustainable is relying on gold in this regard? Also dipped slightly in 2024. So if we had any plans of relying on oil, again, we are not seeing much traction in that particular area. And then when it comes to manufacturing, yes, we've seen the highest number of FDI projects in 2024. But again, these projects are small-scale projects. We need to be able to attract very large-scale projects into the manufacturing sector. And the question is, how are we going to do this? On the back of high interest rates? Probably not. So we need to look at this again. How do we attract large-scale investments into the manufacturing sector? We've talked about the construction subsector already, but we need to reflect on it. Besides government investments, state-led infrastructural development, what happens to construction? We need to look at this as we see a rise in infrastructural issues and also issues around activities within the sector itself. That chapter also touches on water supply, and I need to point out that it's very important for us to look at water supply in connection to what is happening with illegal mining. I mean, there have been several reports about how there are so many operational inefficiencies happening because of illegal mining, and this needs to be talked about. So the outlook for the industry. There are a number of programs that the government has lined up to attract more investment into the industrial sector. We have the 24 economy policy. We are hoping that transforms the industrial sector. We also have the rapid industrialization for jobs initiatives, and then women in trade, agribusiness, and industry program. We know that the subsector is facing a lot of challenges, no doubt. But I think to make the industrial sector really the transformative arm of our economy will take a lot more than just putting in policies. And again, the question is, how are we going to do this as we're currently relying on gold earnings? Okay. So the last chapter that we look at is the services chapter, and a lot has been said already. We already know that the sector continues to be the driving force dominating in 2024 and also possibly dominating in 2025. It contributes the largest to GDP, and it's also the best performing when it comes to sector growth. Yes, on the back of ICT. Now the question is, if you look at this graph, since 2021, the ICT sector that drives the services sector is also not growing as fast. In 2024, it actually reflected the lowest growth in that subsector. And so the question is, if you have a subsector that is driving your main growth and it's also not growing as fast, what happens to your overall growth? We need to reflect on this. And as we reflect on this, I think the bottom line is, how do we translate growth in the services sector to transform the other sectors? It's a big elephant in the room that we haven't yet talked about. The services chapter also touches on other subsectors within the economy. It talks about education, it talks about health, transportation, and tourism. I'm just going to highlight a few issues in these particular subsectors. So for education, we pick up two indicators: the gross enrollment ratio, which at the basic level we are seeing some improvement in that particular indicator. It was 112% in 2024, up from 106% in 2023. At the JHS level, however, we have a slight dip from 98% to 96%. Now we move to the completion ratio. Again, we see some improvement, slight improvement at the primary and JHS level, respectively. But there are still challenges. We all know that there are challenges, especially with our completion rates. At the primary level, it's still way below target at 80%. We know that this is because there are issues to do with access when it comes to certain areas where education facilities are not optimum. With health, we highlight two indicators. We highlight the doctor to patient ratio. We see a slight improvement. Again, it's still high despite this improvement. We also highlight the maternal mortality ratio. It worsened from 2023 from 109 to 112 per 100,000 live births. Again, there are questions about where we are posting our health workers, especially in underserved districts. How are we able to encourage our health personnel to move into areas where there are no personnel? When it comes to transport, again, we're seeing significant increase in cargo traffic at our ports, up by about 32%. Air passenger transport has also increased by about 9.8%. The authors highlight the issue about heavy reliance on road transportation. It seems as if our railway networks have never been optimum, in spite of all the investments in that particular sector. And this really has implications on how we sustain our road infrastructure. On tourism, we do have increases in international arrivals, but then we see that the value or the expenditure from the tourists when they come remains flat. We are not seeing much differences across the 2 years. And so the idea is to implement maybe a longer-term vision for the tourism sector to encourage more value in that area. So we are looking at the outlook, which reflects on what we expect in this year, 2025, and also in the coming years. The sector will still be the key driver of our growth, but again, growth will slow down to about 3.8% in 2025 and 2026, and then do moderately well, recover a bit more in 2027, going up to almost 5%. Some have said that the slowdown in the growth will be attributed, or is attributed, to fiscal consolidation and base effects. But again, we are yet to see how that translates amid some of the global issues that we are facing. So in education, the outlook, which also reflects on some of the programs that the government has put in place, especially to expand access to tertiary education. We are talking about free university education for disabled students, the no free stress policy, and again, we question the whole idea about the student loan trust fund, issues about the legal basis that allows first-year students to access loans when they come into the university and not before they do. So the question is, why don't we just amend that law so that they can get access to the loans before they actually make their way into the universities? Again, we reflect on the fact that university fees really are currently below the cost of training. And so if the government is going to cover the first year university student fees, are those really the actual cost of training our students? So we really need to look at the fair cost of training graduates. On the health side, there are efforts to expand access. We have the Ghana Medical Trust Fund that has been established. We have an expanded disease coverage under the National Health Insurance Scheme that includes mental health conditions under OPD services. On transport, there's a big push. The government has an investment in the road infrastructure. There are also plans to amend the LI 2180 to legalize motorbikes used for transportation of passengers. Again, we caution that this particular initiative needs a broader stakeholder engagement because there are issues around road safety that we need to deal with before this becomes an amended law. On tourism, which is the final point I want to make, is the introduction of the Black Star experience. The idea is to leverage public-private partnerships to promote Ghana's tourism brand. Again, it's building on initiatives in the past, such as the Year of Return. So we are hoping that in essence, we'll have maybe a more long-term tourism plan for Ghana, which envisages more initiatives to sustain and improve the gains from that sector. So thank you very much for your patience. We've gone over our 1 hour presentation for the SGER, but I hope the highlights have been very useful. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Before we get to our next section, I would like to acknowledge the presence of Professor Ferdinand Ahiakpo, Deputy Managing Director, ADB. Kindly give us a wave, sir. Thank you so much for coming. My colleague, Dr. Ralph Amma, will take over and lead us in the question and answer session.
Thank you, Dr. Santipoku. So I was asking her what exactly I'm to do. So clearly, if you have a question, kindly raise your hand. We'll take maybe 2 or 3 batches of questions, each having 5 questions. And then my job is to point to the person who would answer the question, maybe, I don't know. All right, so any questions, please? And when you get the mic, kindly tell us your name and the institution that you're coming from. Then you can ask your question. So any question, please? Yes. We have a hand here. Any others? Only one question? Okay, which means that 2 things. Either you've understood everything. All right, please, your question.
Good afternoon. Good morning to everyone. And I'd like to congratulate the Institute for this report. My name is Manasseh Tete Anderson. I'm from GSS and an alumni of ISE. My question has to do with the relationship between the cocoa and illegal mining Prof spoke about. The first one is, was the report able to establish the quantum that we generated from the illegal mining? I only saw for small-scale mining, but it doesn't necessarily mean it was illegal mining, because he cautioned that we should watch out on the drastic effects if we are controlling the... And then the second question also has to do with if we were able to establish any regressional analysis between loss. I know there are other reasons why the agricultural export has declined, but we're able to establish a decline of loss of agricultural land, which are rather being used for the illegal mining. So that we say that, okay, agricultural export is declining, or the production is declining, but is due to land, agricultural land being converted into galamsey sites, and then we are getting more gold and exporting more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think there's another. I saw the lady's hand. There's one here, please. And then we'll come to Prof.
Good morning. My name is Naomi. I'm a PhD student here at ISE. And from the report, we can see that inflation has declined. Food prices, which are a major cause of inflation, have also declined. But then currently there is a glut. And even though agriculture is expected to rise by about 8%, agricultural production, I'm wondering what the glut means for that projection, because with the glut, it means that farmers are sort of disincentivized to produce more. So how do we marry that with the projection for the growth of agriculture? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Yes, over here.
So, thank you very much. I just need some clarification. My name is Mumuni Abu Reps. So, I realize that your analysis shows that we seem to be getting much from mining, but we've been talking about the devastating effect in terms of mining. especially with illegal mining. What I want to understand is if you have the opportunity of meeting the president today, based on what the CSOs are saying, and even the UTAC front is talking about in terms of a state of emergency, what would you actually tell him to convince him in terms of the actions to take in relation to illegal mining? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes. One has been got.
Okay, I'm Niamu from Prudential Bank. Okay, the first question has to do with the outlook on the economy that was touched on as to some of the inflows we're expecting. But,
sorry, please, can you?
Okay, the first question has to do with the outlook, okay, on the economy. There was a mention of some inflows from World Bank, but I didn't hear of the $4 billion that the Bank of Ghana governor cited as some of the inflows we should expect, which should also probably show up reserves. And then secondly, what's your take on BOG's ongoing liquidity sterilization via the OMO bills? What should be the threshold in balancing?
Sorry, can you repeat your question and say it louder? Sorry.
Okay, the first or second? The second one, okay, it has to do with BOG, current liquidity sterilization. What should be the threshold in view of our quest for growth, as well as how to manage inflation currently?
Thank you very much. So, Prof, I don't know whether you got the last question. Yes. Exactly. All right. And there was a question about, so we'll see how we'll answer the question. There was a question about if we were to meet the president, what are we going to tell him, right? And since if it's no, I know, yes. There's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. So if ISA is invited to meet the president, your guess is as good as mine. The director will go and meet the president. So we invite the director to answer that question. And then we'll take on the others. What do you think? Yes, yes. So, Prof. Okay, so I'm told you go with Professor Barchile.
Actually, I will go with Professor Bawachele. You know, the thing with professors is that they never ask easy questions. And so, Prof. Bauer's question, hey, Prof. Abu, yes, question. It's an interesting one, and it's one, you realize that I was very deliberate to dance around it, because there isn't an easy answer to it. The point I was trying to make is that there are real benefits that is accruing at the macro level, at the individual level, such that the incentives is not straightforward in terms of making a decision. But also because we haven't properly built into our cost benefits some of the non-fiduciary elements. Health, water, you saw the water projections. Okay. So, indeed, for policy, we cannot base policy on sentiments. Policy would have to be influenced by evidence. And so I would ask the president to form another committee that will do a critical cost-benefit socio-economic analysis of the issues. Remember, it is not mining which is bad. It is how we are doing it. Okay? And again, it's why we were deliberate to highlight the benefits. Okay? So countries are mining and are using the outcomes of the mining for good. UAE, right? It's oil. But they've been able to translate that. Even Botswana on this continent. Okay, they've been able to translate that into positive outcomes. So the answer is not a straightforward one. The answer is not, let's stop all mining activities. The answer is, do we truly understand the cost and benefits of what it takes to get the mining, the gold? If the issue is about the process and how we get the gold, then let's tackle that. Let's not throw the baby with the bathwater away. Okay, so I guess that is why, and remember, this is the second president who is also being very careful about how they deal with the issue, because it's not straightforward. Okay, so obviously we need to invest to get the right evidence to inform the policy. Okay, so I've also thrown it back to the president. Thank you. Oh, no, but I thought we had a pact, and the pact was that the others are here. So the BOG one, I think Prof. Kote and who was the other one? Gloria. So they can answer the BOG question. Okay, the others are here, so they can address that. So, Prof, should we bring that, or we should go to, I'm looking at, now somebody was asking, my good friend from GSS, he's my very good friend, who was asking us to do regression analysis about, you know that at ISA we love regression analysis. But you do ask, I don't think in the SGER it is very clear, or there is any analysis on the trade-offs between the mining and land for cocoa production. So it will be dangerous for me to speak out of turn. But there are experts here who may have done some work on it. And then the inflation, there is glut. What does the glut mean for growth of the agricultural sector? The glut in itself, or increasing production in itself, is not a bad thing, right? It's what you do after. If the glut means that the incomes that farmers get from agriculture will decline, then clearly that will compromise on the growth projections. However, if we can do the right things in terms of processing, then absolutely. Remember that our yield gaps is woefully inadequate, right? Even for maize, in spite of all the research and all the things we've been doing for cereals, our maize production is still under 3 tons per hectare. Is that not so? They are Greek experts. I think that is right. Okay, so, but we need to get it up. Others are doing 6 tons. Okay, and it's resulting in positive outcomes for them. Obviously, Vietnam exporting rice to Ghana means that they are doing well in terms of the outputs. So getting more outputs, whether it's from higher yields or from the area that you cultivate, isn't necessarily the bad thing. It's what you do after. Okay? And so putting in place structures to ensure that the benefits can properly accrue to the farmers is what needs to happen in terms of the But that also requires the investments. Okay. So I'm saying that there isn't a clear-cut correlation between the glut and a decline in your growth. Okay, so what else were the easy questions? I'm looking for the easy ones. Okay, so the more difficult ones, Prof. Kote.
Hello. Yeah, good morning to you all. Today I came here with a mindset that I was going to sit and listen, not to talk. That's why I didn't wear a suit. Like, yes, I think this issue came up yesterday at the launch of the CD at 60. The governor said, we've seen inflation reducing, and we are going to see it reduce further by the end of the year. I was a bit concerned because, one, I would have loved to know the optimal rate of inflation, because some level of inflation is good. As you hit hard on inflation, you are going to hurt growth because you are not spending. I would love to see deficits, reasonable deficit levels, reasonable rates of inflation, some stability in the exchange rate, but not at the expense of growth, not at the expense of jobs. And therefore, we need to be told what the optimal rate of inflation for Ghana. I don't know if Bank of Ghana has that research. I am yet to see, but we need that before we continue to hit hard on inflation. Yes, it's good to have single digit, but you should know where you're going to. So my point about the sterilization is that it's good to sterilize, but up to a certain level. And what is that level? We are yet to ascertain. I have seen a paper by the IMF some years back saying that for a developing country, anything around 12%, 10 to 12% is optimal. Others are saying 5 to 7. We need to estimate that threshold for Ghana so that we know if we continue to sterilize, we don't hurt growth, we don't hurt employment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. So I think, because of time, probably we'll just take 2 or 3 more questions, but I just wanted to add up to what Professor Osei said regarding the illegal mining issue. For this particular study, and for, I think, so far what we've seen with the SGER, we've not really run some of these econometric models to tell, some stories regarding what our friend Anderson from GSS asked. I think that the relationship between cocoa and illegal mining, we've seen some stories out there. I mean, the data that we use to run this doesn't really look at the details, whether we are looking at illegal gold coming from illegal mining sites, and then how it is affecting agricultural land. So maybe it's something that we can look into. But from the data, we see that there is a decline in how much we are getting from cocoa, from about, 2-point-something billion to 1.6 billion. And in the same vein, we are seeing for minerals alone, and gold making more than 80% of that, we are seeing a growth of about 7.6 billion to about 11.6 billion, which is interesting. And like Prof said, the problem is not with the mining, the problem is with how we do the mining. Right. So yes, it's a wonderful thing that you said, and definitely we can look into running some more interesting models to see how agricultural land for mining, and what is going on in there. All right, thank you. Any other? Yes, to say you want to? Okay. And so, Prof, by this, maybe when you are going to see the president on that, you can include me in the
so that we are not we don't pay all the attention to illegal mining. I would also want to add that the causes of the cocoa production decline is also coming from what is happening in Western North, where we have about a third of our production.
Yes.
And I believe more than half of what we have there has been affected by the cocoa swollen shoot disease. So we've had to cut a lot of the cocoa there down, and we are replanting, and that is a crucial point. So as we think about Galamsey, we should also know that we are rehabilitating some of our farms in Western North. But the pathway of Galamsey as a negative effect on cocoa production is through labor supply. And it might interest you to know that today, if my mom wants farm labor, she may drop her money and it will take her about a month to get someone to go to the farm to support her. That is because the mining sector is actually pulling away the labor into the mine sites. So as for the land, yes, some people cannot go to their cocoa farms because of the holes that have been dug. They believe they might fall in and get hurt. That is there. But the farm hands is also crucial. Who goes to weed the farm? Who picks the cocoa? Who dries it? We don't have the hands. So currently what we are doing is to get hands from Benin. And they come once a year. And that is a huge problem. Don't also forget that the weather has changed a bit. And it's also putting pressures on the production. The question which is bigger for us is that whilst we are experiencing all these things, Côte d'Ivoire's output has not fallen. So there are bigger questions. Do the produce buyers have money to buy? How have we treated people who buy the cocoa? So we also need to think a bit more about the management of the sector beyond Galamsey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. A.J. Holmes. Yeah. Yes, Professor Janku. Yeah. So I think the authors are now talking. So
no, I'm not going to answer a question. I have a question myself about. Is it a question or a contribution? Regarding the question that Professor Feni raised about manufacturing. You know, some time ago, there was an issue about tax-based incentives, right? And it was criticized because blanket holidays, that didn't help. But I think we need to perhaps revisit that issue about incentive-based tax incentives for promoting manufacturing. I mean, could we task these incentives to say jobs and other specific indicators that we can monitor and make sure that we use such incentives to promote manufacturing. The second thing is about construction. I see a lot of people coming from Togo and Benin into the construction sector because their work is better. I mean, could we provide more training for our young people so that they can take up some of those spaces so that we can benefit more in terms of job creation in the construction sector? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, when you talked about the people coming from Togo, around the room people were nodding. You know, it is said that they have a very strong, apart from the work ethic, they have a very strong apprenticeship program, an apprenticeship system that is working very well for them. So I think it's a good contribution. If the TVET folks would invest more in that, I think it would be very helpful. Yes, Prof. Texan.
Okay, so my contribution is to possibly try to answer Prof. Cortez' question about what is the optimal level of inflation. The optimal level of inflation in Ghana is between 6 and 10%. That is the rate of inflation that will allow the monetary policy to drive interest rates to very low levels to make our domestic firms competitive in borrowing at very cheap rates, to expand output. So it is that rate that we hope that will lead to growth in output from the private sector. So that is a response to his question. Now, as we speak, the city is stabilized, fiscal deficit is low. You saw from the presentation that we are even going to outperform the budget fiscal deficit for this year. And these are the ingredients that you need to stabilize the economy, to allow interest rates to drop. So Ghana has an optimal inflation rate between 6 and 10%. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Dr. Nana Masanti Poku, please come and take over. Let's clap for her as she comes. Yeah, I think we've exhausted the questions. The rest we can do, or you have something to say? No. The rest we can do when the program has ended. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So before we launch the report, I would like to acknowledge the presence of Prof. William Babwatin, Vice Chancellor, Methodist University. Prof, we are grateful that you are here with us. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of Prof. Mumuni Abu, Director, RIPS. Thank you. And then Dr. Clement Adamba, he's the Director, Legon Center for Education, Research and Policy. Dr. Adamba. And then all ISA alumni, please give us a wave. We are really happy that you are here with us this morning. So we would like to launch the report at this point in time. I would just mention a few personalities. Director, Prof. Dakwose, our chairperson, Prof. Kujo, Prof. Babwatin, please join them. IMT, ISA's IMT, I think they know themselves. Okay, yes. Prof. Ahiakwo, please join them. And then I would also like to acknowledge the presence of Professor Bernard Akwa Obeng, Dean, Gimpa Business School. Prof, please give us a wave. Thank you. Yes. Professor Peter Kwote, please join them.
Vicentia.
So I have been handed the microphone and I'm expected to say something. So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I declare the State of the Ghana Economic Report for 2024 duly launched. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So please, the copies are on sale today for this event. It's going for 100 Ghana cedis. When we are done, it's 150 Ghana cedis. So please buy it before you go, like 10 copies each. Yes. One. So, my friend, so we would like to present some copies. Our first copy goes to Professor Kujo. Oh. Professor Babwate, we were going to. Yes. Thank you. Professor Ahiapo. Professor Mumuni Abu. He's the Dean of the Gimpa Business School. Yes. Yes, please. Thank you very much, Director. So please, if you are interested in buying a copy or copies of the book, just go to the registration desk and you are getting it for 100 Ghana cedis today. After today, it's 150 Ghana cedis. Thank you very much. Closing remarks, yes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam MC. Well, also soon we've come to the end of the program. I'm expected to give a few remarks to end it all. But before I go ahead, I'd like to make a little disclaimer. See, some of you may not know, but I am a pseudo-economist. My colleague Isaac Osaya Koto will tell you, you know, when we were at the University of Bonn in Germany, I had to join the economics class. In fact, I took a course in econometrics. I even have a certificate in econometrics. I think you should give me a round of applause. I believe there are quite a number of you who are familiar with the ZEF system, Center for Development Research in Bonn, because I know ISA had a strong connection, a collaboration with that school. And if you go to know the arrangements in the school, they have 3 main sessions. So there's the ZEF-A, what you call the ZEF-A. Now I understand it has changed, but those were, when we go, we were put into ZEF-A or ZEF-B or ZEF-C. ZEF-B was for economics, ZEF-A was for the more or less the arts and humanities, and then ZEF-C was for the natural sciences. And so with my background in geography and also having done the humanities, my good fit was to go to ZEF-C, which is the natural sciences. So I was in the class with the physicists, the mathematicians, and the people who had done biological sciences and chemistry and all that. And I took a course in that. And by the way, I was the top in the class. Then I also came to ZEF-B to do the economics and econometrics. I was not the top in that class, though. But I managed to get my certificate for that. So I am one of the few breed of people who, you know, if you want to talk about a multi-disciplinarian, somebody working multi-disciplines, you know, started off from the pure arts, history, religions, geography, and going the full gamut. So my PhD, for example, is in geography and soil science. Can you imagine that I have a minor degree in soil science? So anytime I meet my colleague economists, I get excited about some of the things that they say. And although sometimes I have an issue with them, I've really enjoyed this morning's discussion. You know, my job these days has taken me away into looking at a lot of educational issues in the country. But coming here this morning to see through these presentations really has been inspiring for me. And once again, let me commend ISA for this initiative. So when the presentations were being made, I tried to put down a few things. I mean, not in any intellectual capacity, but the things that excited me. So for example, when the director presented the global outlook, and he talked about Donald Trump, and the fact that his tariff wars has potential to disrupt global trade volumes. I said, here we go again. You know, Donald Trump is really leaving an imprint. I hear he wants to go for another term. I don't know if that's going to be possible. But you see, for all the things that is happening, it should tell us one thing, that we ourselves, we should look at what we can do for ourselves. You know, because I believe as we go into the future, there are probably going to be a lot more Donald Trumps coming up in the West. And so as people on this continent, we may have to look at what we need to do for ourselves rather than depending on some other people. A lot has been said, I don't want to go into it, but there were some things that were striking for me. To know that, for example, South Africa is now the top export destination, okay? And most of the things we are sending there is precious minerals, mainly to add value. I was intrigued about that. But which country used to be our #1 export before South Africa? Director, if you can give me that information. It was mainly to Europe. Okay, so now we are doing South-South, the South-South cooperation thing. But if it is also to add value to our goal, then I think we need to do more. And then I was also excited to hear that the report also look at water supply issues. I didn't know that the SGER could go and also look into health issues and education issues. I was pleasantly surprised when I saw that. But for me, one issue of water, aside what's looked at, that we should also be thinking about is this proliferation of boreholes in urban settings and some of its implications for the geological integrity of urban areas. I think I recall there was somebody from physics department who presented his viva And the topic was so interesting, so I attended. And this is an issue coming up, and we probably need to look at. Now, you also talk about education, and you gave just about 2 or 3 indicators. I don't know if that's all what is in the report. There's more, okay. But what I want to tell you is that, you know, the College of Education, we have established the Legon Center for Education Research and Policy, and Dr. Damba, who is the director, is here. In fact, we are planning to come up with what we call the State of Education in Ghana report. Oh, please give us a round of applause. Which will be modeled along the ISE's State of the Ghana Education report. So we are just copying ISE. Okay. We are just copying ISE, but I think that report is also long overdue. I don't know if we can be able to do an annual education report, but even if it is biannual, I think it's something that we should be looking at. So that will be more detailed. LESEP, for example, when the government had the education forum, they presented a policy paper on the school feeding program and made certain recommendations to government, which I think is being put into practice. I'm happy you touch on the fair cost of training graduates, okay? And I'm going to say, you should say it and say it again. Because as you rightly alluded, we don't think, you know, students are paying the right fees for tertiary education in this country. Okay, if you even go to some of the lower level schools, and some of the fees we are paying to send our children to certain kinds of schools, you will know that what the students are paying here is really far below what will be able for us to run meaningfully. So the university has been trying to make a case for that. But you also know all the politics that go on. If you want to increase student fees, there's a lot of processes that you have to look at. I want to round up by maybe making 2 recommendations to ISE as far as this report is concerned. I don't know if you want to take it or not, but whatever it is, they are my recommendations. The first is, for all these reports you have done over the years, you said from 1992 to this point, could you synthesize them? Could you have a kind of put together some team and look at from 1992 right down to the current report you are producing? What lessons are we supposed to learn as a country? Are there any trends in the things that we have done over the years? Because every single year you have produced this report. I believe it has aided policy and practice. But if you should go back maybe for the 60th anniversary of the country or 70th anniversary of the country, you have a synthesis of all these reports you have done into one, report to give us an idea of where we have come from and where we are going. I think that would be my first recommendation. And then the second thing is, I realize these reports do generate a lot of issues, okay? Because you are mainly using secondary data, isn't it? They generate a lot of issues and providing a lot of pointers for further research. And so I tend to sit and I was thinking, ISA PhD students, ISA master students, they should be really very fortunate because they shouldn't be lacking topic areas. Because most of these things are providing topics for future research. At least that's what I saw when I was sitting down. So my question to you is, do you follow up on some of these issues, you know, when they come up? Because when you try to explain certain things and you say, but we don't know what is driving that, but we don't know what is, you know, explaining this, couldn't you commission further research into some of these areas, maybe even if you identify PhD students to do some of those things? And it shouldn't only end up here at ISE. I think it should be available at the university-wide level, because there are maybe students from economics, students from Regional Institute for Population Studies, students from Agric Economics that could benefit from some of these policy or future research pointers that you are providing. I see the guy is playing the music. No, normally when you hear that, I think it's a sign that your time is up. So thank you very much for thank you very much for reminding me. And let me say a big thank you to Director and then the whole officer for having me. It's really been a pleasure spending my morning with you. And I wish you all the very best for the rest of the day. Thank you.
The MC refuses to introduce me. I begin by saying a big thank you to the Almighty God for bringing all of us together for the successful launch of the 34th edition of the State of the Ghanaian Economy Report. Special thanks goes to our chairman for the day, Professor Samoni Adekujo, for steering today's discussions. Indeed, as you said at the beginning, Prof, I believe we've had an evidence-led discussion that informs, and evidence that informs and discussions that transform. Special thanks also goes to the director of ISE, Professor Robert Daku Osei, to the team of authors and reviewers, and to the head of the economics division that spearheads this report, Professor Amapoku Afeni. We thank you for your dedication that continues to produce this report. Please let's give up a round of applause for the economics division. We also want to thank all of you, distinguished guests. Everybody here is special. We thank you for coming, for gracing the occasion. Reps from academia, from industry, from government, we are grateful for your continued support for the work we do. And finally, for the ISA team that has worked so hard behind the scenes to put together another successful policy engagement event, we say thank you. Finally, we just want to say thank you to everyone for being part of today. We wish you safe travels and look forward to our continued collaboration with you. Now on to a few announcements. We have media engagement right after here. After the photographs, please, media, meet with us in the offices. There's an office opposite this one. There's a door right opposite this auditorium. Please meet us there. The director and the team of authors will meet with you for the media engagement. We'll take some photos here. And right here, we are also engaging our alumni. Please, our alumni, can you show us your hands? As many as are here, we are grateful. We extended a special invitation to our alumni, and we are so grateful to have them join us. We have a special engagement with you right here, so please don't be in a hurry to leave. We'll engage with you. So thank you all for coming. Please, let's come around for the photographs. Our photographers, are you ready? We are going to call the order of photos. So, Mr. Chairman, please join the director and the head of the economics division, for the first photo. Please, the rest of us, you may take your leave. Alumni, please wait behind. Media, please wait behind. Special guests, please wait behind. Authors, team of authors and reviewers, please wait behind. Please pick up your pack of refreshments at the registration desk. Also remember to pick a copy. ISA faculty, please wait. Do not go. Okay. Once they are done, please let's have our special guests join them. ADB, Prof. Saban, Professor Mumuni, please join them. Please join them. After that, let's have the team of authors and reviewers join them. Authors and reviewers, please join after this shot. reviewers. Authors and reviewers, please join them.
They've got an awful lot of coffee in Brazil. No tea, no tomato juice, no seed, no potato juice.
Authors and reviewers. Authors and reviewers, please join them. Please, the networking can go on after the photos. Reporters, please move to the auditorium right opposite this one for the media engagement. Authors and reviewers, please let's make it fast so that we don't keep the media waiting. Okay. Alumni will be with you shortly.
It's got an awful lot of coffee in Brazil.
Okay, director, please, you may now go for the media interview. Authors, you may now join director for the media interviews. All other faculty, please wait behind for the media engagement. Sorry, for the engagement with alumni. All other faculty, please wait behind for the engagement with our alumni. Alumni, please come forward. Please come forward.
I don't want to lose the student, but I've got a defied one. I will shoot it. So you tell her, 'cause your love feels better than any love I know. What's my tongue now?
All right, please can we lower the music? I'll now hand over to Professor Charles Aka, Professor Simon Bawachilenu, and Dr. Adokwetego to take the lead on the media, the engagement with our alumni. They'll get us started. Director will join us later.